So now that we have just talked about what happens when there is a surplus or a shortage, let's kind of talk about, kind of what the end result is going to be. So again, if there's a surplus, if we have excess supply, it's going to push prices down. If there's a shortage and we have excess demand, it's going to push prices up. This is going to continuously happen until we get to the point where there's no surplus, no shortage, no excess demand, no excess supply. And when we get there, that is going to bring us to this point right here, where the supply equals the demand, where the number is at a given price, where the number of units supplied is exactly equal to the number of units demanded. So it's going to look something like this. Okay. And when we do that, right. Now I'm going to denote these by P star and Q star. So these are going to be what we call a competitive equilibrium. And a competitive equilibrium occurs when prices are at the point where there's no excess supply and there's no excess demand. At that point, producers have no incentive to raise their prices or lower it. If they raise it, at that price, they're selling everything that they want to sell. So if they raise it, right, they can lose business, and they're not going to lower it because they're already selling everything that they need to. So this point here, this equilibrium, competitive equilibrium, this is the point that we're going to get to. And so how do we get to that point? Well, let's take a look. Let's bring this over here. All right. All right. So now, our competitive equilibrium. It's right at this point here. So at the equilibrium, what's going to happen? It's the point where our supply is going to equal our demand. So we have our two equations here. We have our demand equation and we have our supply equation. Now, at that equilibrium, it's the price where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. So what happens then is that if we're at equilibrium, the price and the quantity in these two equations is going to equal each other. So it's a given the price, so where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied, and so there's just one quantity. And also the price equals, the price from the demand equals the price from the supply. So let's look at that. So if the price of both equations equal each other because there's one price, let's just set them equal to each other. Now again, keep in mind that the quantity demanded and the quantity supply are the same, so now we can get rid of this QD and QS and just have Q. So if that's the case, we have price. We have price equals price. So if we take the price from the demand equation, 70 minus 2Q is going to equal, from the supply, 10 plus Q. If we add 2Q to both sides, subtract 10 from both sides, we have 3Q equals 60, and so Q equals 20. This is our equilibrium quantity. Okay? So to find the price, all you have to do is plug that quantity into either equation. Now, because at whatever going through this process, the price was the same and the quantity was the same, it shouldn't matter which one you put it into. And by the way, that's always a good check to make sure you have the right answer. So if we plug that quantity into the demand, we have price equals 70 minus 2 QD, which is 20. All right, and so that comes to 70 minus 40, 30. And if you plug that into the supply equation as well, you can see that supply price 10 plus Q, which is 20, 10 plus 20 is 30. So that's what we have. We have an equilibrium quantity of 20, an equilibrium price of 30. And bigger. Okay. And so that is our equilibrium. All right. So at the price of 30, the number of units that are demanded are exactly equal to the number of units that are supplied. And with that, it's really like I said, there's no incentive for the consumers, producers, or anything to make any changes because the consumers are getting it. All the consumers who want to get the product are getting it. And for the producers, they're selling everything they want to. So this competitive equilibrium, the idea is that this is where we get to in the long run. This is what it gets built to. The market gets guided to this point. So if we go back to our slides here, we talked about shortage and surplus, the equilibrium price, P star, is the price where the quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, and the equilibrium quantity, Q star, is the quantity bought and sold at that equilibrium price. If we go back here, just do a couple other quick examples. And so we have price equals 160 minus Q. It's down here. So if we graph this here, so we have from 160 to 160, price equals Q, so it crosses here. And so what we have then is we have our equilibrium point, which is right here where supply equals demand. And if we plug this in here, there we go. Right. So if we go through and calculate it, our equilibrium point where price equals demand, all right, where supply equals demand, the two prices equal each other. So if you take the price equals 160 minus Q and price equals Q and substitute in there, 160 minus Q equals Q. All right, this is from the demand. This is from the supply. So we get 2Q equals 160. And so Q equals 80. And if we plug that into the price, for either, or plug it in and find the price for either the demand or supply, you're going to get 80. So that equilibrium price then is going to be equal to 80. And the equilibrium quantity on here is also going to be 80. If we look at another example down here, all right, this time we're looking at it in a table form. And so if we're looking at hotel rooms, at this table, which might be from experience or data, whatever it is, it tells you at each price how many units are demanded and how many units are supplied. So for example, when the price is 10, there are 45 units that are demanded, 0 that are supplied. 20, 40 that are demanded, 10 that are supplied. And so if you're given this information, if you're just looking here, you can also find that equilibrium. Because again, it's the price where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded. And so if you look here, okay, 45 or 0, no, 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 yes. So when the price is 40 here, there are 30 units that are demanded and 30 units that are supplied. So here the equilibrium price is 40 and quantity is 30. Now, these values came from these equations here where for demand it's price equals 100 minus 2Q and supply Q plus 10. And so if we go through and graph that here, You can see where it crosses the price axis is at 100. When you set that to 0, you finally cross the quantity at 50, and then you can put in the supply curve here, cross the price at 10 and goes up. So we want to find our equilibrium price and our equilibrium quantity, which is all going to be right here. Now, we already found it to be the price is 40 and the quantity is 30. But if we go through and want to solve this another way, and this just kind of shows that this all works together, we have equilibrium where supply equals demand, where the two prices equal each other. And so if you substitute in these equations, you get 100 minus 2q equals q plus 10. Add q to both sides, subtract 10 from both sides, you get 3q equals 90, and so you get q equals 30. That's the equilibrium quantity, which we found here. You plug that in for either the demand or supply equation. Let's do it for the supply. Q plus 10 is the price, 30 plus 10 is 40. So this just kind of shows how when you bring this all together, it really all works out, whether you're looking at it in graph form, whether you're looking at it in a table, or with equations. So again, that equilibrium point, that competitive equilibrium, which is right here where the supply equals the demand, it's the price where there's no excess supply or an excess demand, and so that's where it gets pushed to. So there's one price, no excess supply, no excess demand.